So what I'm doing is something called pressure flaking. And like many flint knappers, pressure flaking is one of those vital skills that you need to know if you're looking to work stone. But pressure flaking is simply this. It's taking a fine pointed pressure flaker, a little bit of hand protection, and your thinned out piece of stone and putting some final touches on it. Putting some small flake scars to sharpen up that edge, finalize the shape, put your projectile, your spear point, or even your arrowhead into action. At the Blombus Cave in South Africa, it's really that first archaeological find. Stone projectiles and spearheads and simple tools have a form of pressure flaking on them. The bifacial silicrete points, known as steel bay points, date to about 70,000 years ago. The methods of pressure flaking may have been first invented and used sporadically in Africa before its later widespread adoption throughout most of Africa, into Europe, Asia, and even into Australia. Evidence of pressure flaking in archaeology is primarily found in the characteristic patterns of small, precise flake scars on stone tools, which indicate that a pointed tool was used to apply pressure and remove flakes rather than striking the stone with a hammer or soft billet. Now, where pressure flaking comes into more kind of widespread use is during that Upper Paleolithic around 20,000 years ago. So if we think about the steel bay points that have been found in Blombus Cave dating back 75,000 years ago, pressure flaking was being used. It was being used aesthetically to kind of show the beauty of the point or maybe a knapper's artistic capability, as well as keeping and maintaining points for future use, maintaining their sharpness, maybe removing any sort of flaws, just keeping them at that ready and at the go to employ in any situation. Pressure flaking is simply this. It is kind of the final stages when you are making some sort of arrow point or spearhead or atlatl dart point. You are taking the fine tip of an antler, pressing it into the edge of the stone, and detaching small flakes. This helps resharpen a blade. It also gives it shape. You can make notches. You can do all sorts of maintenance with a pressure flaker. Now, despite it kind of being the last step, often it's the first step that many flint knappers learn. When it comes to pressure flakers, I have a variety of them. Each and every single one serves a different purpose. Some of my smaller, thinner, and fine-tipped ones are really for making notches and just pressing small little button flakes right off the edge of a stone tool to make it extremely sharp. And these flakers here are a little bit more robust. They have a little bit more kind of stout tip that allows me some general stock. These are kind of my go-to. I'm using these quite often. I'm looking to raise and lower edges, drive some flakes across a biface, but these guys are kind of my most common use when it comes to pressure flaking. A good antler tine will really solve all of your pressure flaking needs. These ones are my big boys, and including this one here. All of these serve for me to really gain some leverage and throw flakes across a biface, almost from one side to the midpoint of that biface or slightly across the midpoint. These are a mix of different sort of antlers. These two over here are caribou. These are by far my favorite to pressure flake with. They are the strongest and most durable antler that you can come across in the natural world. I also use these for shooting small flutes up the bases of different projectile points for hafting purposes. This guy right here is my long flaker. This is what I'm working with, a real kind of small, refined edge, but it allows me to sit the butt end of this axis deer antler tine into my stomach, push with my whole body into the edge of that piece of stone, and then drive a flake across the biface. Hand pads are a must. You can use a rolled up piece of hide, whatever that case may be, but you need to have something that protects your hands. Now, how I pressure flake and how I show people to pressure flake might be different from others. A lot of people use copper, totally fine, whatever floats your boat. There's no judgment. I'm a traditionalist in the form of tools that I use. Between copper and traditional tools, I want to say it is very much night and day. It's very easy to pressure flake with a piece of copper, work an entire edge, get nice systematic sort of, flake scars across a biface. For me, I like a little bit more of that challenge, and I like that traditional approach. So when I'm pressure flaking, I keep it very, very simple. I am working this biface right now. A couple hand pads that I'm going to use. I like to go dark stone, white hand pad. I stress to folks that it is your job to get up on the stone. What that means is when you see me pressure flaking just in the palm of my hand or even on my leg, I'm just taking small little pieces of stone off of this biface. But when I say get up on it, I am looking to place my entire body over the top of the stone. I'm looking to line my chest up with my biface and use my legs in conjunction with me pushing into the edge of the stone with my pressure flaker to drive flakes off. How I do this is understanding the different types of abrasions. And I have a video on here that goes over that, and those will help give you a little bit of focus on when, how, and what's significant about abrasion. As I look at my stone, and I've just roughed up the whole edge, and this guy is pretty thin, but I still want to make some adjustments to it. I kind of see my high and low spots. My center line is my piece of stone, and I'm thinking about where I have the opportunity to refine an edge. And what I'm looking to do is drive flakes far enough into this piece of stone that they're not going to ride from one side all the way to the other, but where they're just going to travel up to the stone and kind of taper out in this midsection. That's going to create a little bit of kind of convexity across the top of this stone. It's going to make for a stronger midpoint or ridge point in that stone, so if it ever is being thrown into some sort of intended target, it's better to have these edges break off that can be quickly readdressed and readjusted compared to the entire point breaking at its midpoint. Anytime I'm pressure flaking, if I push the edge of my flaker into my stone, try to drive off a flake and it's not abraded, it will crush underneath that pressure and you're going to get a bunch of little steps and hinges and all sorts of chaos along one edge. That's going to really impact your future pressure flaking as you move forward. I abrade and I hold this guy with my fingers. I'm not squeezing as hard as I can. I'm simply looking to hold my stone in my hand and then take the very tip of my pressure flaker, push it into the edge. Now what that looks like is simply this. Flaker tip, this is my edge, and I'm pushing it in there. As I'm pushing, eventually something's gonna lose. The stone's gonna lose, the flaker's gonna lose, it's gonna slip, I'm gonna cut my hand. What I'm looking to do is not push so hard into my edge that this eventually collapses. I'm looking to push into the edge, and sometimes I'll take my hand and counter push. So I have two opposing forces, pushing up with my hand, I'm pushing down with my flaker into the edge, and then I'm squeezing with my legs to help drive my flaker into my hand pad, driving off a flake. Now that flake totally broke up. You can see from this point here, the flake scar travels all the way up into this point. Now why it kind of terminated there? Well, there's a little bit of a dip. There's a little bit of a pocket right in here, a little bit of a low spot that I'm going to eventually hopefully get all these to taper out in here and then come back onto this side and do the exact same thing. Push in, getting up on it, flaker's in my gut, my hand's nice and secure, pushing with my flaker in, I'm pushing up with my hand, and that flake went from there up on in. Let's do another one. Getting up on it. Flake traveled from here all the way up and in. Traveling from this one went from there all the way just a little bit before the midpoint. Good. You can look at the edges of your stone and essentially say, how much force do I need to apply? What am I looking at on this stone? Do I have to travel uphill? Because there's a difference between uphill energy and there's a difference between some of this downhill energy. As those couple flakes across this back went down, that energy just nicely tapered out. If you're traveling a lot uphill, that energy requires a lot more pressure and a lot more distance to travel. And eventually you're going to kind of terminate a little bit early. It's not the end of the world. I mean, again, it's about tools, not trophies. But understand where that flake is going to travel. Is it going uphill? Is it going flat? Is it kind of going downhill? How those energies will work in your favor if you're trying to throw a long flake. So let's take that dacite biface, use some pressure flaking, and turn it into something pretty cool. Another cutout blade. Rendered fats, a little bit of wax, some pine resin. Seal all the handles. Gives you some stickiness you're dealing with blood or just wet hands. Now, why I decided to create this style of blade, it's a good little bush blade. Your two cutting edges, a small little kind of gut hook, and then a little tail end scraper. So holding it just like this, scraping hide, scraping that flesh and fat off. Cutout blade is my preferred style blade anytime I'm heading out in the bush. Lots of uses. I do have several, so I will post this one on my store at donnydust.com. Pick it up there, first come, first serve. Bottom line, when we think about pressure flaking, it's pretty amazing that over time, Homo sapiens, we developed a skill to fine tune different spearheads and dart points and sharpen up tools that have become dull or even broken. Now we took the concepts of spalling, removing large flakes, and broke it down to a much smaller level with simple pressure flaking to really get the end state that we wanted. I hope this helped. This is kind of a little bit of the history of pressure flaking, well, with some key pointers to understand as far as your position, getting up on it, proper abrasion, and really thinking about uphill energy and downhill energy. All right, that's all I got. Appreciate you watching.